What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan, and today is an episode of The Social Report. And if you're new here, what The Social Report is a monthly bonus episode in conjunction with Trufan, where we sit down and talk about the most recent and interesting social media and influencer marketing news from the last 30 days. As always, today I am joined by Trufan CMO Karen O'Brien and Trufan advisor Scott Birdie. Welcome back to the show, you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having us.
Excited to have you back. And so where I want to start today, I want to start with a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So it involves sports social media, which is where I worked in for about 3 years for anyone that doesn't know. So I'm going to start with a couple, I'll start with these tweets here that a couple pro hockey teams made in the last month. I had a couple people ask me my opinion on. And the first one was with the Utica Comets, their team in the AHL. And one of their fans tweeted at them how pathetic the Utica Comets have to be not to get a goal on a full 5-on-3. And then Utica responded and said, how pathetic does your Twitter have to be to only have 13 followers and no profile pic? And the other one was some fan responded to the New Jersey Devils in the NHL saying, how about scoring, playing defense? No, it's okay. At least you have memes. And they replied with a screenshot of his profile pic with him at the gym with a barbell with no weight on it and said, your tweets hold as much weight as you do. And so these were the two tweets. And so a little bit of context to the audience. So like I said, I work in sports social for 3 years, which is why I have such a strong opinion on this. And one of those 3 seasons was a football team that went 3-15. And so this is what the Red Blacks went 3-15 that year. So obviously the fans weren't happy. I've seen my fair share of negative tweets coming inbound. And so I had some people ask me what my opinion on were with these tweets. And kind of my rule of thumb is like, if a fan it's okay to clap back at a fan if you're responding to their direct tweet. Like, I don't think you should go beyond the confines of that tweet. Like, so I'll get into it in a second with these ones, but like with these 2 tweets, they weren't about the tweet, right? Both responses were at the individual beyond just their tweet, right? Like how many followers someone has, what someone's doing in the gym. And like, I think that crosses a line for me personally. And when you look at like in the case of New Jersey, so New Jersey has almost 740,000 followers on Twitter where this interaction happened. And it's not like you're just clapping back at someone and it's just you. It's you and 740,000 people now that are going to see this, that are going to then start spewing hate towards the person that left that hateful comment. And so it got so bad that the person they clapped back on about how much weight he was holding in the gym literally deleted his Twitter account because there was so much shit coming back at him from his tweet. And so the other thing to remember too with sports is sometimes like your angriest fans are your most passionate fans, right? So it's a fine line to walk with that. And as a social media manager, especially in sports, you're going to get a ton of rude comments. Like that comes with the territory. And I'm not saying that it's okay for fans to do that, and in New Jersey's case too, I understand it was a bad year. So you're probably seeing a ton of hateful comments coming in. Like Utica's actually having a good season, but New Jersey's having a rough season. And so I understand you're probably seeing a lot of negativity coming inbound in your notifications. But like as a social media manager, especially in sport, like you're supposed to put your brand in the best light. And clapping back like this to me just isn't professional, right? Especially when you look at it from the context of social media manager, you're clapping back on someone from like it's a faceless clapback because they don't even see who you are. You're representing an organization that's coming back at them. And so it's just, to me, it's unprofessional and it crosses a line. And it's unfortunate because these tweets with these hockey teams replying, like when I went back to find them and you look at the other engagement they're getting, like these are some of their top performing tweets, which only encourages the behavior to just clap back on fans as hard as you possibly can because it gets engagement. But what you're doing is you're fueling the exact behavior that upsets you in the first place that caused you to reply to a fan in that way. And so I just personally don't agree with teams doing that, with the people running these accounts doing that, because the person that you're replying to doesn't even know who you are. And like it literally in the New Jersey case, we saw it got to the point where the guy had to delete his Twitter account because there were so many fans coming inbound just ripping on him. And so I think you have a responsibility as a social media manager to understand that you're wielding power to an extent with an account with so many hundreds of thousands of followers. And so for me, as someone who's worked in sports, who's been in that situation where I had an account with over 100,000 followers as managing, which there was nothing but negativity when we went on a losing streak of like 10 games. But there was never a situation where I was like, I'm going to start going back at fans for things. And so, like, again, totally cool if you want to clap back to a fan, if it's like, if you're responding directly to their tweet. Like in the context of that first tweet, it was, or with the New Jersey Devils tweet, he said, how about scoring, playing defense? No, okay. At least you have memes. Like if they'd responded with something along the lines of like, sir, we are the social media department. We get paid to make the memes. Like I'm okay with that. But like when you cross that line and like you go into his account and blow up his profile photo and take a screenshot and circle the lack of weight on the bar he's been, like that to me just crosses a line. So as you can tell, it's probably the most passionate I've been about anything in one of these social reports. Like this is just like it's close to home to me as I have a bunch of experience in that. So I'm curious if either of you two have opinions on this whole thing.
I would tend to agree with you, off the bat on like the social media manager having crossed the line by calling out. I think I again, I'm not really sure exactly what the tweets are, and I haven't looked too deeper into like you've obviously seen some level of the reactions that were pushed back at the fan who reached out towards the Devils as a result of his sort of, I guess, involvement in that tweet, or him being the one who kind of sparked that tweet. There's like a lot of community effects here, though. I mean, the first thing I do think about is bullying, frankly, as like as more of a general term. There's certainly a line that can be crossed anywhere socially, where you go from sort of poking fun and laughing with versus laughing at and really singling somebody out in front of a crowd. And so there's probably an aspect of that I think that you're kind of referring to here, is that by not just replying or not necessarily just like poking fun and kind of like coming back with a sort of smart remark, they went out of their way in essence to bully, or not to do that, but to what turned out to be that, in the end, which is certainly a line nobody should be crossing. I think like that's kind of the one end that I look at this through. There's a couple other things that I do think about though. I mean, like, I'm not sure if they were feeling so personally attacked or something by that one tweet. Like I don't think that was necessarily what sparked the reaction. And like had they maybe messaged the person first saying, "Hey, we have this on draft right now," or something along those lines. Would you be okay if we put this out because we think it might draw some attention and help out the team? Then there could be like a split side to this, where if you do get somebody's consent and ultimately they become more involved with the community through the means of doing that, like I don't know if it's okay, but I think that would have been like a good step to take by the team if they knew that they were going to consciously call somebody out like that. Because when you flip the coin, to your point about like some of the most angry fans often being some of the most passionate fans, the any tweet is ultimately free exposure, and it's pushing that name out into the local community of that individual fan. So for him to be, or she to be, forced to delete their account after it's happened because of that sort of negative fallback, it kind of goes to show that there was obviously not that, like, whether it's a level of maturity or just like sincerity there on behalf of the brand. So I'll kind of agree with you through that context, but the larger subject here is pretty interesting, and it's actually one that I recall coming up as a pretty sure it was a speaking topic at a conference that was held in Toronto, maybe 6 months prior to the pandemic. It was called like the World Series of Sports, or something along those lines. And they had some great speakers. The NBA media manager for NBA Canada, I believe it was, like he was there, and the subject got brought up as well about how teams in the NBA can kind of poke fun back and forth at one another, and sometimes that gets taken to a pretty extreme level. But I think the obvious thing in that situation is that those are brands poking back at brands, and like there's people sitting behind the screen getting paid to come up with something that's extra juicy, extra spicy, and is really going to fire up their fans, not in a way that's like overly negative to a person and is going to be attacking, but in a way that's like naturally a rivalry. Like these teams compete against each other. The players don't like each other. So that's a bit of a flip side to the coin. But I like the passion, Jacob. I like the fiery nature of your response.
And yeah, and just to clarify too, to your point, like I don't think it was like a person. I don't think the people like the social media managers saw it as a personal attack, but I just mean like they can't see that, and probably the person tweeting didn't see it as a personal attack either, right? Because they're just tweeting to the New Jersey Devils, like it's just a logo on
Of
Twitter to them and
course.
not a person. So I don't think it was like personal on either side. But
But it's just
yeah,
like, why else, why would you go that far? It's just like, were they actually discussing that in a
yeah,
boardroom somewhere? Like,
Sound a bit personal though in the way they responded. I mean, it sounds a bit toxic, and I think the key thing in there is you're representing the brand. And no matter how much someone fires you up or triggers you personally, you have to respond as a brand. And so I think it went a bit personal. Yeah. The mom in me would also say, you know, stop doing that.
I love that mom remark. I mean, I think that's important. Like, it goes back on the notion of bullying, or like when that line has so clearly been crossed where you're just like, but why? Like, why would somebody go to that length to basically ruin somebody's like social career on Twitter? And likely like that person's in a room somewhere. If they've chosen to take that action, like it's it's actually got to them at a much deeper level than it ever could to the brand.
Yeah. And lots of people that work at brands that have responded in that way as the brand have lost their jobs. There is a line there, and there's social media guidelines internally at brands around where that line is. And usually, you're encouraged to go high, not go low.
I think that's an extra good point to bring up too, because if you go back some of these episodes where we've talked about TikTok incidents, where like workers are literally shining a light on brands in the utmost positive ways, yet they end up getting fired. Like, you almost
Yeah,
have to be looking at that as like that's happening right now too. Like, yeah, great
I
point.
agree with you though. I really do, Jacob. I think yeah. No matter, I mean, if you're a social media manager that feels like you need to lash back from the brand voice, you shouldn't be in that job.
hmm and it's like, and I understand like like putting myself in the social media manager's shoes. Like I understand because like this is going to be it's going to be a layup for engagement. Like people are going to have a field day with that tweet, and it's going to perform well. So I understand from that perspective, but it's also just like again, like we talked about the line. Like where's that line, and when do you stop? You know what I mean? Like I think there were ways to reply to it that didn't have to go that far, but that's just
Is your intention, though, as the social media manager to get engagement and views, or is it to build community?
oh, of course, it's to build community, but sometimes too, like granted, I don't know the inner workings of the New Jersey Devils and what their the social team is like, what their review process looks like. But like, if you're graded as an employee on engagement versus like, how do they quantify community building? I don't know. Again, it all depends on how they look at it internally, and the metrics they track are different things. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was just something.
Don't not mention them on this podcast. We might get taken down.
Yeah, I'll keep them at all.
They're gonna
Keep
come
them out of the
back
title.
hard on the social
I'm
report
coming
once they
for
find
you.
us. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna take all my gym posts down from the internet.
Oh man.
Oh,
Great
But no,
topic,
the
Jacob.
backlash.
Awesome.
thank you. Yeah, I didn't have an article. It was just like some people sent me screenshots. They're like, "What do you think of this?" And I was like, "Well, my poor buddy Robert Greeley. I'll give him a shout out. He sent me both of these, and I had a couple of people send me, but Rob sent me both of them, and he was probably just expecting like a quick answer. And I think I sent him like a book worth of answers, so he was just probably not expecting that. So I'll give Rob Greeley a quick shout out. But no. Speaking of sports, one thing, Karen, I know you wanted to talk about was the gaming industry report that Trufan just put out. And there was actually a crossover between the gaming audience and the sports audience. So I wanted to kind of see what are some other things that you took away after spending. I watched the amount of work that went into it. What are some of your big takeaways from that gaming audience report?
Yeah. I mean, our team at Trufan basically dug into 54 million gamer profiles on Twitter. And a few people asked us why Twitter, right? It's really because the entire gaming industry is there. You'll find bloggers, journalists, streamers, publishers, console manufacturers. I mean, literally everyone that is in gamer industry is on Twitter. And there's a lot of conversation there. So some things that really surprised me. I mean, I have worked in gamer marketing in the past, so I feel like I had a pretty good handle on who the gamer, was. But some things that really surprised me, for example, we found a significant number of people in that 54 million gamer audience that actually follow major cosmetics brands and on a regular basis tweet about skincare, wellness, self-care, and cosmetics. And a lot of it, like, I'm putting on my makeup before I get on Twitch. Like, it was definitely tied to gaming. It wasn't just sort of in the day of their life. So I found that absolutely fascinating. I don't know if either one of you would have thought that of gamers, and it wasn't just girl gamers either.
I think that's insightful because I don't tend to watch a lot of Twitch, but I still am guilty of having the Facebook app downloaded on my phone, and I'll delve into that like in a mindless frenzy sometimes, or just sometimes like check birthdays and things like that. What I tend to see gets the most engagement because I swear there's this weird mix right now on Facebook Watch of kind of just like those like cringy setup videos of like random pranks and stuff like that. And then there's a lot of gaming that they're like actively pushing into their feed that's going on. They seem to like highlight different games throughout different like months in that. But to your point, Karen, of cosmetics and that industry, particularly women seem to get the most engagement from what I like just from an eyeball view and naturally scrolling down those pages sometimes. They tend to get a lot of engagement. And it's not like I don't think, because there's like a discrepancy in terms of like what people are looking to watch, but like frankly, it feels when I'm watching those things like the women put a lot more time and effort into not only like their look, but like the makeup of that entire studio and things of that nature. Like there's one or two guys that I've seen like the trucking game on and like they're like full on into that like that trucking sort of setup, but like otherwise it doesn't actually surprise me that much. I think it's just more the story or like having that insight to tell. Um, when it's backed by data, it makes it ever more clear that like, hey, there's a lot of people who are probably spending a lot of time on those online stores, especially given the fact that, the last year and a half, we really haven't had that in person.
I think one thing that interested me from the gaming industry part was, I mean, obviously I understand that gaming is a part of culture now, but it was interesting to see the crossover with other industries that also drive culture. Like we talked about, obviously, like there's a sports crossover, and sports definitely drives culture. But there's also what I found interesting was the luxury brands crossover, and fashion drives culture so much as well. So it's interesting to see kind of the crossover between these different industries that drive culture, and gaming being a big part of that now, and finding that overlap into the other industries that also drive culture. And I think we're only going to see more collaborations, cross promotions, and things with other industries as time goes on, in gaming, which is already massive, continues to grow.
And I think the luxury brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, a few others, are really trying to connect with the gamer audience. I think it sort of speaks to how mainstream gamers have become. But they're starting to create designer skins and all sorts of crazy stuff that I think is going to be super fun. Even if we go back to cosmetics, like there's cosmetics lines around Tetris and World of Warcraft and all sorts of fun games that a lot of people would arguably sign up for that before it even comes out. I also thought, like, just the fact that we've always sort of looked at beverage brands with gamers, and we have a few customers that are beverage brands that also market to the gaming audience, but a lot of them are wine drinkers. That really shocked me. I would not have thought that. um, and also just things like, I don't know, like, yeah, the luxury thing really threw me for a loop. And then also, if you look at sort of the fact that, so many, we go back to the sports fans. So it doesn't surprise me that NBA, MLB, NFL are like the top sports. What did surprise me is the amount of people that are following all major sports. There's 22,000 super fans amongst that 54 million. That if I were, a sports marketing company, I'd be going right after those.
Finding out who your tribe is amongst that 22,000, and especially like as you come back into a post-COVID world, the sorts of opportunities that you have for in-person experiences and like just hyper engaging that audience, both through the means of like offering that like in-person sort of communal gaming experience where whether that's at like stadiums, because I think there's those more like San Francisco, Atlanta, like there's a group of NFL stadiums that have only been made in the last several years where I'm sure they've already built in like massive components around gaming or have uh, these minor sort of interactive zones, if you will. I remember even seeing that going back to when I was at NBA Summer League, which would have been the last one prior to COVID, with the Trufan guys, and the amount of kids like it was arguable that there was like the same amount of kids playing NBA 2K just outside of the seating areas, like in the loops surrounding the stadium, as there was people watching those summer league games in the seats. So naturally, that's just such a point of engagement and like a way of fostering community around those games. I'd be curious. I was going to actually ask this before you brought that up, Karen. I've noticed these F1 has kind of been in headlines recently, Formula One racing, about like how they had years of losses. And now after they've had this sort of three plus seasons of coverage through Netflix, they're reaching profitability again. And then I've noticed that I've also been getting like as I've gotten a little bit more intrigued into like that space, not necessarily watching the racing, but just like what's gone on there. And I watched the latest episodes from the last season of that like F1 show. I'm kind of wondering what the cross will be in terms of like how Netflix sort of steps into gaming, and both equally F1 may start to dabble in like different forms of gaming to take a piece of that audience, because they seem to be the type of sport that's like a little bit more catered to, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like people who have like technical interests, because there's so many like weird components to those vehicles and like that level of racing. And then I've also seen that games have retargeted me that are like mobile focused games where I think you just kind of drag the cars along the track or whatever. So no doubt that like everybody's trying to take a bit of a stab into that market. But yeah, like it's just there's endless opportunities to just drive engagement across virtual and in-person experiences.
I feel like it's one of the most underleveraged audiences that are out there. I mean, gamers, you can go into so many sub niches within gamers because it's become so mainstream, but overall they're extremely engaged, very affluent, and global also. So yeah, there was a lot of real confirmations, but then also a lot of surprises in that report, and we're very proud of it, and we're going to continue doing those kinds of audience reports and bring some of the insights to this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. I'm excited to see the next one. Do you want to tease the next one, Karen, or do you want to hold that off?
Yeah, I mean, the next one we're going to do is on the basketball audience. So I think, another sort of crossover into various areas of culture, but a bit different than the gamer audience.
Very global, like you just said, though, too. Yeah.
And so NERF announced that they are hiring a chief TikTok officer. All right, now this is 100% like it's definitely like a marketing stunt, publicity stunt, which worked because again, we're talking about it. The Verge covered it. It was in the news. And so this chief TikTok officer was a contract position for 3 months. It paid $30,000 up to $30,000, so $10,000 a month for the 3 months. And you were there to help NERF craft their TikTok strategy and help figure out how to entice and reach Gen Z. And which is interesting. But when you look at one thing that just caught me off guard, so $30,000, I was like, holy cow. But then when you look at it, they're only expected to create 10 to 12 TikToks per month, which is over $800 per TikTok. And so so I was looking at this and I was like, well, they're obviously going to want to work with someone who has like history and track record on TikTok. But if you have like influence on TikTok, how much would it cost? Like, would you do a quote unquote brand deal essentially if you're going to come take over TikTok's channels for or NERF's TikTok channels for 3 months for only 30 grand. So I thought it was interesting. I got people to talk about it. I was like, who exactly is the right person to take on that role? Because an influencer, if they're going to do 12 brand deals a month, they can make way more than 30 grand. But you're not going to want to give 30 grand to someone who has no track record on TikTok. So I thought that was interesting. But I mean, I wanted to apply for the position, but you had to be living in the United States. That wasn't possible. But no, it was just like it was a cool position. It's definitely a publicity stunt. I haven't really followed through. I know the job posting has been taken down, so I'm assuming they're either interviewing or that person's coming on soon. But I want to know your guys' opinion on this whole marketing plan in general.
I think it's freaking cool. I mean, I think they did a. I can't wait to see all of the content that comes out of it. I mean, I don't know. Has it already opened up? Because I haven't seen anything yet,
No.
but I have seen the video that they posted looking for the person.
I'll check right now and see if they've started posting on TikTok.
Can I ask another background question in that case? Was there like a spree of UGC that sort of flew out of the posting coming out, and like people kind of like applying or auditioning per se, like through one video of sorts for this role, or was it just a little bit more formal than that? Like it didn't really result in a ton of organic content.
That I don't actually know because I just read the
Mhm.
quick like this was so I wrote all this down when I read the article at the beginning of the month.
No, interesting.
It looks like a marketing stunt, but looks like they're actually hiring someone.
Yeah, like a bit of both,
But I
probably.
think it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have figured. I mean, like a lot of people would then just kind of start putting out content to like be like, well, I like, check me out. Like, look how innovative this is. Or yeah, exactly. Just sort of like to like prove the worth and like the credibility, so to speak, right off the bat before they even put their application in. Like, if I put it this way, if I was applying for that role, applying without attaching or hyperlinking one TikTok video that you made about NERF just seems like a dumb idea. Like somebody else is going to do that and they'll probably already have made some level of traction in the market, just like, proving.
It feels like a campaign itself because why else wouldn't you just go and hire some influencers or work with TikTok themselves?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. When I first read the article, though, I was excited because I thought they were hiring like a legitimate chief TikTok officer, like as like an actual position. I didn't think it was like a 3 month thing, and I was like, that's really cool that they're investing that much resources into TikTok. But I mean, like it needs it. Like you need to be posting on filming and editing videos like that, coming up with ideas. It is a full time job in its own right just to do TikTok. So thought it was super cool that they when I first just read the headline that they were hiring someone to do their TikTok, but then I realized what it was, and I was like still thought it was kind of interesting, but not quite as cool as I thought they were hiring someone just specifically to manage TikTok indefinitely, not just for a couple months.
Yeah, definitely an interesting position. I mean, I think Nerf has been playing in the TikTok space for quite some time now, if I'm not mistaken. I just know this because I recall seeing a reposted video on LinkedIn very early on when TikTok was just starting to take off, as like a good example of how brands had started to use TikTok. So clearly they've been pretty invested in it. And, it's another like kind of good step and being the first to sort of do something in such a massive space that's just taken off at this point. I want to touch on one part though that you brought up. I don't know a ton about like brand deals on TikTok, but I do know just from a friend who has a relatively low following, under 50K, that's kind of specialized in the finance space on his content. He's been approached by like Questrade, Wealthsimple, a couple different like banks, like a Coho, which is a no fees bank here in Canada and such. And generally speaking, the rate, I think he's also worked even with Anchor, but the rate has been around $1,000 potentially for a video that you don't even have to post, like just a recorded video so that they can promote it across their own channels how they see fit, um, give or take. And so, like, the pay for that role, I would say is okay. But actually, depending on how good the work is, like if somebody were to come in and crush 10 million plus views in that month, like, which seems like a reasonable goal, I guess. Like, I don't know, just kind of off the top. Um, like that's a win for Nerf, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And a super fun product that I think a lot of people will get behind. And one that I think will play well in videos too, right? I mean, it's not like somebody's giving you, I don't know, a piece of hardware or something that doesn't really do anything, or, you know, some boring kind of everyday thing. Like Nerf toys are fun. Yeah, totally.
They are fun. Haven't had one of those in ages, but would love to go play like a Nerf
Mhm.
session once the COVID pandemic is over. Like that could be an opportunity for Nerf right there. Just like start sending out Nerf guns, and you have this like proper these cities that just have like Nerf wars coming out of quick. Like that would be crazy.
Speaking of influencer marketing, Scott, do you want to talk about the influencer marketing flywheel?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to touch on it quickly. I just come across an article recently that basically for the B2B world talked about this idea of taking the R out of influencer and sort of the success that they've had looking at this flywheel that's known as the influence marketing flywheel. Basically, I mean, you can even post the picture probably, but what it does touch upon is a simple 5-step flywheel that's you could argue starts with creating content, engaging on social, inviting people to a platform, helping them with the problem, getting a warm intro, whatever, and then providing value they can't get elsewhere. So like combing through previous work and uncovering which ones rocked and didn't, then bringing them over. Don't push, instead nudge. So improper, like I guess indirect CTAs, if you will, offering then free tools to those people once they're in, and then sort of reaching them once again through the means of like a podcast, YouTube channel, blog site, and which will in turn reach social and start to create that flywheel. Um, Ultimately, just a concept that when started was more focused on, I think, people hearing about a brand by result of doing something in the marketing field, but grew in the form of word of mouth to the point where I think like 80% or so of the traffic that they then were getting 6 months after the fact were coming from word of mouth. So pretty interesting concept. And I mean, I always love, when people are trying to like refig the influencer word or that sort of, I guess, like getting more niche in a space that is pretty deep right now, but still just has a lot of varying components and a lot of various strategies and methods on how people are doing it.
What I liked about that article was they were treating influencer marketing the way that it should be by brands. Sort of end to end, 360, engage with the influencer, try to strategically choose an influencer for who their followers are, make that following your followers as well, or try to. I just thought it was sort of a like how to do influencer marketing right.
Like really thinking about it, like
Mhm.
depth versus width, so to speak, and like quality over quantity.
Which is the way to do it.
100%.
Anyone have any other stories before we jump off here? Before we wrap things up?
I don't think so.
Nothing.
I'm all set. Yeah.
Yep.
Good session.
Yeah.
Let's see if anything
Yeah.
pops off in the sports world with some more people getting dunked on.
There you go. But no, I want to thank you both for taking time to be on the podcast. As always, I want to give you both the floor. Where can the people find you? Plug anything and everything you got right now.
Bond Jane Bond on Instagram and Twitter.
And my name's Scott Bertie, TY at the end there. But LinkedIn, Instagram, hit me up.
Awesome. As always, I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so people can find it. And I want to thank you both once again for taking time to be on the podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening, whether you've listened the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Everyone do me a big favor, go and follow Scott and Karen. Like I said, I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below if you'd like to find it, where all of the stories we talked about today will be down there as well. And feel free to comment down below your thoughts on anything that we talked about. And if you'd like to follow me, you can find me everywhere on social media at the Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.